A real estate kingpin and his wife living the good life.
They were very successful, entertained quite a bit, very social.
Until an unthinkable crime.
The most evil, vicious case Munster's ever seen.
And behind it all, an unlikely mastermind.
He thought that he was above everyone and then got caught with his hand in a cookie jar.
He's not the guy. There are just crazy people out there that do terrible things to other people.
A tale of malice and greed with a surprising gay twist. Tonight on Power, Privilege, and Justice.
Good morning, Northwest Indiana. It's a little before 9 o'clock. Looks like we're in for a nice day here on AM 1230 WJOB, the voice of the region.
Munster's kind of a quaint little community.
Large palatial homes. You can sense there's money there.
Beautiful community, big old trees and gorgeous houses.
In Munster, it's relatively low crime, right? Murder is just not something that happens in Munster. It shouldn't happen in Munster.
November 9th, 1989. An unfamiliar sound stuns residents of this wealthy Chicago suburb.
It was a minute or two before 9, and the police department received a phone call that there had been a shooting.
Police raced to the scene.
The officer came upon Mark, screaming and yelling, bleeding.
The young man identifies himself as Mark Levine.
He almost drew down on Mark because he didn't know who he was. Didn't know whether there was somebody still in the house.
Mark tells the officers that his parents have been shot and the gunman has fled the scene. Investigators find Mark's mother, 53-year-old Marcia Levine, in critical condition in the adjacent China room.
She had 2 wounds, one to her chest and one to the side of her face.
Down the hallway, they find her husband, real estate mogul Donald Levine, also clinging to life.
Donald Levine had similar wounds, one to his chest and one to the side of his head.
While the victims are rushed to the hospital, investigators go room to room looking for clues.
I can remember going through the house. It was a beautiful home. The inside of it was immaculate.
The whole crime scene told a story. How brutal it was, how methodical it was, and how deliberate it was.
Kind of walking through the house, it was kind of surreal because you could see where someone had been injured, where there was blood splattered around.
In the kitchen, police attempt to question Mark. But oddly, he refuses to talk until after he makes a few phone calls.
Mark told us that he was outside loading the car, getting ready, because it was a big day for him. He had just graduated from law school and was getting ready to go get sworn in in Chicago with all the new lawyers.
That's when he says a blue car pulled into the driveway.
Hi, FedEx for Marcia Levine.
Mark went into his house, spoke with his mother, said, that's odd. This guy's supposedly delivering a package from Federal Express, and he doesn't have a uniform or a truck.
The individual came out with a handgun.
All right, get down on the ground.
When Mark got down, he was struck on the back of his head.
He claims he blacked out for a few moments. When he came to, he heard his mother scream and then a gunshot.
He ran ran out of the house and across the street. Didn't know what had happened to his parents at that time, but he was running to get help.
The Levine residence was directly across from a grade school.
He had this subject that was bleeding run into the school, which traumatized a lot of kids in the area.
Mark used a payphone at the school to call police. He went back outside, saw the killer drive off, and returned to his house. As detectives asked for more details, news arrives that Mark's parents are dead.
Until the Levine murders, the hottest thing to come out of small-town Indiana was Cole Porter. Now, there was mayhem in Munster, and the townsfolk were terrified.
Right from the beginning, you knew that this was not normal. This was something more than just a homicide. It brought the tension up within the town, like how could this occur in this small, quaint community? So a lot of pressure was put on right from the beginning to solve the case.
Behind the front door, detectives find their first clue.
Mark said he had to sign for something, that there was an envelope, like a Federal Express envelope. Well, that had apparently been dropped on the floor. When the door was pushed open, the envelope had then been pushed between the door and the wall.
During all the commotion, I believe the suspect forgot that he had left it there.
As the search for evidence continues inside, detectives question the crowd gathering outside.
There was a great deal of information that was obtained from neighbors and parents who had dropped off their children at school.
Witnesses say they heard gunshots and then saw a young man run screaming from the house. Moments later, a second man emerged from the house.
When he approached his car, he struck the hood in a quick, violent manner.
The man circled around the neighborhood as if he was lost, then finally sped away.
Someone local probably wouldn't have done that. It was like this person came in to do a job.
Police issue an APB with a composite sketch and a description of the getaway car.
You know, a very big, large man that had a full beard, driving a car, nondescript blue Chevy Corsica.
We pulled what's called an offline search, a search that resulted in about 800 hits.
We were kind of chasing an unknown, someone that had come and done this very serious crime in our small, quiet community, and then just kind of disappeared into the thin blue air.
2 millionaires in the morgue, no apparent motive, and now a beefy, bearded hitman with a bad sense of direction. This mystery in Munster was just heating up.
It happened at 9 this morning in this fashionable Munster neighborhood. A man claiming to be a delivery person got Mark Levine to let him into the family home. But once inside, Levine was ordered on the floor and struck on the head with a gun. Mark's parents were also home.
The assailant then proceeded into the house and shot both Mrs. Marcia R. Levine, age 53, and Donald Levine, age 55.
It was all over the place. We don't get much Chicago press down here unless it's something big, and it's plastered all over the paper.
This investigation is ongoing. We are continuing to determine if other parties were involved in this killing. That is one aspect of this case that needs to be resolved.
It really was quite an affluent community. A double murder on a workday morning was huge news.
Prior to that date, the last murder that we had in town, I think, was 8 years before that.
The police department, I'm not sure that they worked many homicides because you just didn't have that in Munster.
There was intense scrutiny because, one, it happened in Munster, Indiana, and murders don't happen in Munster, and especially of a very wealthy couple. I mean, who would do this?
They were very well respected in the community. Their neighbors, their friends just spoke wonderfully about them. They were absolutely shocked that something like this could happen.
A few days after their shocking murders, Donald and Marcia are laid to rest. Their son, Mark, is surprisingly absent.
Mark's the victim, but he's acting kind of strangely.
He did not and was not able to go to his mom and dad's funeral. He felt that he was at risk. He was convinced that the killer was going to do whatever he could to finish what he had done.
As the sole heir to his father's $25 million fortune, Mark immediately comes under suspicion.
3 people in a house, 1 person survives. How'd that happen? Why did it happen? Maybe this kid's got something to hide.
Mark was supposedly one of the targets too, but survived. How could that be? Parents were shot. Mark was hit on the head. Why wasn't Mark shot too?
After skipping the funeral, he hires an entourage of armed guards.
He immediately goes into hiding under very, very, very tight security.
When he pulls the plug on several of his father's real estate deals, police grow even more suspicious. They ask Mark to take a lie detector test, and he complies.
Polygraph was given, and it was inconclusive. The kid was all over the board.
On paper, Mark Levine was a Jewish mother's dream come true. Devoted son, hard worker, graduate of Yale Law, but his behavior was so peculiar. Either he was hiding something, or he got hit in the head really hard.
He did have things to gain from the death of his parents, but then the injuries he had sustained were fairly severe.
And his concern and his love for his parents, he idolized them and they idolized him. It was kind of hard to say that Mark had done this.
While keeping tabs on Mark, investigators expand their search for suspects.
Your first thought is, who hates Donald Levine? Donald was a very aggressive real estate developer. So would he have enemies? That's the first thing you look at.
By all accounts, Donald and Marcia Levine were living their dream life. The son of a wealthy furrier, Donald was raised on Long Island's Gold Coast with his younger brothers, Robert and Billy. Donald later attended the University of Wisconsin. There he met Marcia Postraw. And in the late 1950s, the couple settled in Chicago, where Donald embarked on a career in commercial real estate development.
He was the mover and shaker. He was a tough businessman. He could put deals together and make things happen that other people couldn't.
Through the 70s, Donald built his empire, securing a firm grip on the Chicago market. But there was one thing Donald loved even more than his business.
They were tremendously devoted to their only son, Mark. They were very, very involved in his future and his education and everything that he did. He was referred to as the young prince.
Once Mark left for college, Marcia devoted her time to local charities, and Donald expanded and diversified his business.
Donald Levine had business interests in several states, some of which was real estate development, some of which was investments in gold mines, and actually running some shopping strip malls.
But as investigators discover, Donald didn't make it big playing nice.
There was a picture painted of him as abrasive at times. It's my way or it doesn't get done.
Donald, he was a very astute business person, but he could also make people mad.
Apparently, his hard-nosed approach rubbed someone the wrong way.
The speculation did go to a mob hit because of the way it was done. And there had been rumors about Donald being with the mob in Chicago.
We thought that it was a business deal, gone bad, wrong person to mess with.
But recently, Donald had shifted his focus from the Midwest to the Southwest.
At the time when Donald was murdered, he was pursuing the purchasing of his home in Scottsdale and future business opportunities in the Arizona area.
His 2 brothers, Robert and Billy, were already living in the swanky Phoenix suburb of Paradise Valley, where Robert had a lucrative real estate company of his own.
Phoenix was booming, and Donald saw that his brother was growing in his development business. And he approached Bob that he would like to come to town and they could take it to the next great level.
So the brothers went panning for gold in the great Southwest. The Arizona real estate market was ripe for the picking. But to everyone who knew them, Levine and Levine made for a very odd couple.
Robert was kind of the blowhard. He was the guy that stated that he's worth millions of dollars, but when you really look at it, it wasn't there.
Robert was the schmoozer, definitely. And Donald was the CEO.
Traveling back and forth from Chicago, Donald kept a tight leash on the Phoenix office.
Robert was just kind of there to kind of manage property and kind of be Donald's assistant.
It was Robert's job to run the Phoenix place, only Donald controlled the money.
The partnership appeared to be a success, and Robert was soon living the high life. Designer suits, luxury vacations, and a palatial home in the hills. But appearances can be deceiving.
There are always problems in business, especially a growing business with a lot of money, a lot of investments.
Investigators learned things got ugly in the summer of 1989, when Robert took off on a month-long vacation to Italy.
Donald had come down to Phoenix to babysit us. And while he was there, he decided to check the books.
Donald discovered $275,000 missing from an account.
And then he starts ranting and raving, calling Robert all kinds of names.
He felt that his brother had defrauded the corporation, as a result defrauded him. There was telephone communications between office personnel in Phoenix and Robert Levine when Robert was in Sicily. His response, "There's no big deal, I'll explain it when I get back."
That set Donald onto a new tirade, and he made all kinds of threats, like tell him I'll cut him off from any income, tell him I'll do this, tell him I'll do that.
Investigators learned that Donald moved to straighten out the situation.
It was decided that Robert could work for Donald and make a salary, but certainly all his power had been taken away from him.
Robert was successful because of Donald's success. And he was going to be driven out of the company. And that was completely Robert's meal ticket. Wow, that just set off bells and whistles. That started confirming the issue of motive. Real good.
Between the cooked books and the raging case of sibling rivalry, the police had to ask, what about Bob? Dear old Robert now joined his nephew Mark at the top of the suspect list. The Levine family circle was tightening into a noose.
As pressure mounts in the Donald and Marsha Levine murder investigation, cops are faced with two possibilities. Either Mark Levine tried to cash in early on his parents' fortune, or Donald's brother Robert took the fast track to CEO. Then, investigators get their first tangible lead.
Inside the FedEx package, they located a map, which had Midway Airport circled on it. So our gut instinct, of course, was that the subject flew into town and rented a car. We served quite a few subpoenas on the rental car companies, and one evening we get a call from one of the companies.
They match a rental car to the one seen at the crime.
He had a list of 4 blue Chevrolets that he rented that day from Midway Airport. And as he's going down the list, he finally hits, I think it was the third one, that was rented to a Robert Levine.
Bearded and burly, Robert fits the description of the gunman. But when police confront him, he produces an ironclad alibi.
Ultimately, you found out that the night of the murder, Robert was having dinner with a group of people at a nice restaurant in Phoenix. And so then the investigators kind of shifted gears. Is this another false trail? Is it something we haven't found yet?
Detectives take a closer look at the rental car agreement with Robert's signature.
You knew there had to be another piece in this puzzle. As we went through the rental agreement, we were able to find a phone number that wasn't Robert Levine's.
Phone number had a Phoenix prefix.
So we got on the phone with Phoenix PD and talking back and forth, we found out that that phone number was to a Bruce McKinney out of Phoenix.
And that started the process of focusing in on Mr. McKinney.
They run a background check and learn that McKinney is married with kids and working as a handyman, carving wood figurines at an amusement park. He has just one arrest on his record.
But other than that possession of marijuana with intent to deliver, McKinney hadn't been a target of anybody, hadn't had a criminal record, really hadn't done anything.
But then they get a hold of McKinney's file.
When I first saw Bruce McKinney's Arizona driver's license, and I first saw Bruce McKinney's mugshot from Phoenix PD, and you would have placed either of those two next to the composite drawing, they were one and the same. That was a fantastic match.
And there's another connection.
When we interviewed people from the Levine business, McKinney's name came up as having been a past employee.
Apparently, McKinney was hired as a favor to the youngest Levine brother, Billy. But what he did for the company, no one seems to know.
He had been coming into the office quite a bit. He was supposed to be scoping out some land deals in Tucson or something.
I can remember talking to the office staff and say, what did he do? I don't know. He just came in. What would he do? He'd go into Robert's office, close the door.
How did this shiftless pothead whittle his way into the Levine brothers' inner circle? Were they suddenly in need of hand-carved figurines? Or was there something sinister going on behind closed doors?
Robert and Bruce McKinney, from what we could tell, weren't that close. They weren't that good of friends. Bruce kind of didn't fit there. What's the connection? We have no clue. No clue. But there's this link. The rental car agreement is a huge issue.
Investigators search for more clues on the envelope the gunman carried to the Levine's house. First, tests reveal a set of latent prints, then another lead.
We tracked the FedEx package down to a hotel in Hammond, which was just 5 miles from the Levines. We checked for people who had arrived late at night and checked out early in the morning, since the murder was in the morning. There was a total of 5 people who had checked out before 8.
One of the guests was a Paul Barrett of Florida, and something on his registration rings a bell.
The actual address was McKinney's former address in Arizona.
Investigators sift through flight records for the alias.
We found out that a round-trip ticket had been bought, and only one part of that ticket had been used to fly in from Phoenix the night before the murder.
McKinney's Arizona police file is rushed to Munster.
They actually had the plane bring his prints to Chicago. Detective Strubeck met the plane, signed for the package with the prints, and took them directly out to the crime lab. The results were a positive match for Mr. McKinney.
This was a huge moment for the Munster police. But if they thought they had the tiger by the tail, they were in for a really big shock when they found out where else Mr. McKinney had left his prints.
A month after the shocking attack at the Levine home, investigators finally have hard evidence linking Bruce McKinney to the scene. What they're still missing is a motive for murder.
Once we started looking and getting all these pieces and all the pieces of the puzzle are fitting in, we knew we had McKinney, but there was always the why. Everything kept pointing back to Robert, and that Robert had this falling out with his brother Donald, and that McKinney was known to Robert.
We have motive, we've got opportunity, we have familiarity between Robert and Bruce. We have people that are seeing them together.
Months after the murders, police arrest McKinney and bring Robert in for questioning.
Oh, we wanted everything done at one time. So there would not be an opportunity for McKinney and Robert Levine to talk to one another before they were actually in our custody.
McKinney refuses to talk.
He received a court-appointed attorney, and they refused to discuss anything about Robert Levine.
Unlike McKinney, who was stone silent, Robert Levine didn't shut up. He started spinning like a top. But for all his chatter, he said absolutely nothing.
He gave 359 answers. He went all the way around it, never answered the question. He gave answers in reference to who could have been involved with this that were all the way from a syndicate hit to business dealings to bad relationships. My take on his responses, he was lying.
It always was the goal to take this to the next level of why McKinney did this. He was extradited back into Indiana to face charges.
But months go by, and McKinney refuses to roll. So prosecutors up the ante and seek the death penalty.
I think he looked at his attorney and he looked at the whole case, and their interpretation was a good case had been made. So in order to escape the death penalty, it'd be in my best interest to cooperate, which he decided he's going to do.
I can remember to this day him being on one side of the table, me on the other, and me reaching over, shaking his hand without any emotion whatsoever. Just sat and explained how he walked into somebody's house and just blew away 2 people. It was unbelievable.
McKinney tells them Robert offered him $1 million to do the job. Then the planning began.
McKinney and Robert had actually come out before the murders and scoped out the house, did a reconnaissance trip.
They rented a car utilizing Robert Levine's American Express card and his Arizona driver's license. Robert Levine showed Bruce McKinney the layout of the neighborhood, of the house, and what the house allegedly looked like inside.
Then, McKinney says Robert told him the ideal time to strike.
Robert Levine indicated to him that Mark Levin would be in town the night of Wednesday, November the 8th, and the morning of Thursday, November the 9th, and that he had to travel that day to Chicago.
McKinney claims he was given explicit instructions to ensure the Levine fortune stayed in the family.
He had been instructed by Robert of the order that he was to kill the people. He needed Mark to die first so that there was no living relative. And he needed Marcia to die. You then kill Donald. If it went in that order, Donald dies last, the estate would then go to Robert.
Once he saw Mark escape, McKinney says he fled the scene, dumped the gun, and called Robert. Investigators ask why he didn't chase Mark and finish the job.
McKinney says that he turned and drew down on him to shoot him, but he says he didn't because he was running toward a bunch of kids.
How ironic. A hitman with a conscience. With McKinney's story in hand, prosecutors had Robert in their sights. But they'd need more than the testimony of a convicted felon to bag their prey.
We knew that there was going to be an issue with his credibility because of what he had done. And we knew that the only way the credibility was going to be substantiated was getting every piece of evidence that he told us about.
There were recorded telephone numbers made from various motels back to either Robert Levine's business or Robert Levine's home by Bruce McKinney at the hotel that he was staying at in various parts of the country.
If he said, I stayed in this hotel, we went and got the hotel receipt. If he says I rented a rental car under this name, we went and got the rental car receipt. If he says I took a flight and here's where I sat, we interview the people around him to verify that he was there.
More than a year after the murders, a grand jury indicts Robert Levine on charges of conspiracy to commit murder. But when they go to pick him up, the surprise is on them.
We got the indictment, and I remember Special Agent Chuck Gerlecki coming and saying, he split. He's gone.
Robert sensed that it was going to come down on him, and he just up and took off. He went to Mexico.
At that point, we were like, oh, man.
For weeks, investigators try to pinpoint his location, but can't seem to close in.
Couldn't have been more frustrating. We had to shift from focus of the prosecution to finding a fugitive. And in our opinion, a very dangerous fugitive.
With no leads, they turn to his family and friends.
We kept the pressure on big time through Robert's mother, Robert's brother, Billy, and then eventually Robert couldn't take it anymore.
Robert Levine surrenders to authorities in Los Angeles. Before extradition to Indiana, he's booked at the county jail.
The Metropolitan Correctional Center in downtown Los Angeles is a pretty scary place. We walked him in, and this door flies open, and these two giant guards come walking out. I mean, the biggest men I've ever seen in my life. I can remember us turning Bob over to them, and he was petrified. I was petrified, and I wasn't even going in there. You know, so I was thinking, well, God bless you. We'll see you back in Indiana.
Schmoozing isn't exactly an applicable skill when you're rubbing elbows with Bloods and Crips. But that didn't stop Robert. His big mouth was about to finally do him in.
Awaiting federal trial, Robert Levine remains behind bars, accused of conspiring to kill his brother and sister-in-law. Investigators are confident they have a solid case.
There's an old adage, know thy enemy, and in 100 battles you'll be victorious. We knew the enemy. We felt we had a very good case.
But in Robert's camp, no one can believe it's come this far.
Those around us that had known Bob did not believe it. We're talking about a man who is extremely intelligent, and he's going to be fool enough to say, I want you to go kill my brother, and by the way, use my credit card and my driver's license. There's no way that happened. I asked the FBI man, why are you pursuing Bob? And he said, if not Bob, then who? And I said, that's not a good enough reason to try to take away somebody's life.
A more likely theory, they say, is that McKinney acted on his own, then cut a deal to save his life. And Robert's defense contends McKinney may have had his own axe to grind with Donald.
Donald had decided that he was going to put Bruce in charge of a major project that they were developing.
Before the ink on the deal was dry, Donald discovered that the relationship with his little brother Billy and McKinney was more than a friendship.
It was understood that Bill was gay, and Bruce and Bill were having an affair together.
When Donald found out about this, he was really angry. He was furious that Bruce had been involved with his baby brother. He let Bruce know he was going to be fired.
Some say Bruce went to Munster that day to change Donald's mind.
I think Bruce went off some deep end. He was going to confront Donald. He was going to force him to listen. And that his past relationship with Billy shouldn't affect whether or not he was qualified to do the job.
Defense attorneys often drop hints and spread rumors, but this 11th hour revelation was a real bombshell. No one knew how much damage it would do to the prosecution's case, but everyone was dying to find out.
Every day there wasn't a seat to be had. Ladies from the community were there with their brown bag lunches and their cushions. You know, they could sit on and watch the show.
A respected family in the community murdered, their son injured, the brothers charged with hiring the hitman. It just had all the elements.
From day one, all eyes are on the defendant.
Robert sat at the table with his lawyer, acting very confident. I'm not guilty. I didn't do this. I'm being railroaded.
We discussed the case that I had prepared. He was optimistic. He maintained his innocence from day one. He said, I loved my brother. I would never have hurt him. I remember those words. I love my brother, and I wouldn't have done this.
The prosecution's case is plain and simple.
Greed was the sole motivation for what Robert did. He was on his brother's coattails. And when his brother had made the decision that you're done, you're out, he panicked and realized that if I don't do something, I'm done.
Robert's lawyers contend that McKinney acted on his own and that his statements implicating Robert were pure fiction. The woodcarver's testimony would make or break the case.
This man gets in front of this jury, packed courtroom, and talks about murdering these two people in the greatest of detail, and it's as though he's just eaten a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. No big deal.
He literally said, Mark Levine, you're lucky you ran out of that house, because I would have killed you. No remorse whatsoever. None. Zero.
He was just very cool. I mean, no emotion, almost cold-blooded. No effort to defend himself or to fight back, which is a bad witness for me and a good witness for the government.
Still, it seems the case against Robert Levine could go either way until prosecutors call a surprise witness.
When Bob was sitting in prison, he made friends with this fella, John Ronaldo.
Ronaldo was a con artist. He was serving time for various kinds of fraud and used different names in prison.
Robert didn't realize who it was until he walks into the courtroom, and then all hell broke loose. He tells us that Robert confides in him the motive, that Donald was gonna cut him out of the business because he embezzled, and Bruce had to kill people a certain way. I mean, just, it laid it out for us. I mean, it was pretty amazing.
Ronaldo's testimony was the nail in Robert's coffin. That on top of McKinney saying Robert hired me to commit the murders, it was too powerful.
A sexually confused hitman, a con artist snitch. It seemed like the small-town Indiana jury had seen it all. But there was still one more Levine to take the stage, the reclusive young Mark, and his testimony would blow the lid off the whole case.
In the final days of testimony, Mark Levine emerges from hiding and faces his uncle in court. He tells the jury that Robert called his father just days prior to the murders and seemed unusually interested in Mark's ceremony.
He specifically called up Munster, spoke with his brother, and verified that Mark Levine was coming into town. Is Mark going to be home? Yeah, he's coming in Wednesday night, and he's going to be sworn in Thursday in Chicago. For Robert Levine, this was out of the norm. Other special events that occurred prior to this, there were no plans. There were no call up, hi, how you doing?
Trying to deflect suspicion back onto Mark, the defense introduces the inconclusive results of Mark's polygraph test.
The police tried to take the position that no, this was a formality. They never suspected anything. But I don't think that's the case. I think that he was somebody they were looking at initially.
I think it got jurors to thinking, maybe Robert didn't do it. Maybe Mark was in on it. After all, he survived. Maybe he wanted his parents' money right now.
But witnesses from the scene backed the state's case. McKinney was there to kill all three Levines.
As the neighbors and witnesses said, he goes down to his car and he's very upset He slams his fist down like, damn, I didn't get him. You know, I didn't do what I came here to do.
The concept of Mark even being able to plan the murders, I know you're not supposed to say impossible, but that would be absolutely, utterly impossible. Not when you looked at the relationship of that kid with his parents. Impossible.
For 12 hours, the jury considers the evidence against Robert. They find him guilty of masterminding the brutal slayings.
Robert Levine reacted like as if to say, oh my God.
I've had people say to me, are you sure? And I have said, absolutely, I am sure. Robert Levine is the only human being that was responsible for hiring Bruce McKinney. Robert wanted to maintain a lifestyle that he had grown accustomed to, and he was going to do whatever it took to maintain that.
At sentencing, Robert receives life without the possibility of parole.
When the judge asked Robert if he had anything to say before he imposed sentence, he just kept proclaiming, I didn't do it, I didn't do it. Expressed his love for his brother.
I have no doubt that he's not the guy. I know he's innocent. It's easier to believe in a conspiracy than it is to believe that there are just crazy people out there that do terrible things to other people.
But to everyone else, it's the oldest story in the book.
It was a classic Cain and Abel, brother against brother.
Robert was this millionaire wannabe who tried to give the impression that he was better than everybody else. And it just shows how all of that can get caught up with greed and the potential of doing something horrific like killing people.
Robert always wanted to be Donald, but he couldn't. He wasn't as bright. He wasn't the wheeler dealer that Donald was. He didn't know how to make money like Donald. Robert should have sat down with Donald and say, you know, help me do this better. But instead of going to Donald, he killed him.
At the end of the day, you really have to feel for Mark Levine. Not only did he lose his parents, he lived under a cloud of suspicion for years, terrified that the real killer would be back to finish the job. It's a memory that must haunt him to this day. For True TV, I'm Dominic Dunn.